Shulman, the president of Women in Film. So happy to be here with all of you today. And I'm sure many of you already know that Women in Film, which someone just pointed out to me today, is 45 years old, hence middle-aged, is devoted, of course, to gender parity in all areas and to creating sustainable careers for women in the arts. And I've been feeling like maybe a good thing to say in addition is that with all the things that are going on as regards the movement, there's a really important North Star for us to remember, which is, I think what we're all doing here is that we're trying to create a better world. And without sounding grandiose, in the end of the day, the purpose of diverse storytelling is so that we can learn about one another, and we can learn what our different points of view are and hear each other's visions. And by doing that, better understand each other in a world capacity, which will affect everything, from the way that we fight our wars, to elect our leaders, to run our schools, to run our homes. And we should never forget that that's why we're really here. And I'm so happy to be able to be here as a result of Stella Artois' supporting women in film because of their shared mission for gender parity and their absolute devotion to the importance of social purpose in filmmaking and in storytelling. And thank you so much for being our partners and for hosting us. And I'd just like to introduce our moderator, who will introduce our fabulous panelists. So let me bring to the stage, I don't see where she is, but Amanda and Duca, you're behind me. She's already here, so I'm not bringing her to the stage. She is a writer for Deadline and a fabulously talented moderator, so I leave it to you. Enjoy.
I'm really happy to be here. This is actually my first Sundance experience, and so being at this panel is a real joy and experience for me. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. To the immediate left of me, we have accomplished filmmaker Stephanie Elaine. And Stephanie is the owner of Homegrown Pictures, where they've produced movies like Hustle and Flow, Black Snake Moan. They had Justin Simeon's Dear White People, which premiered in Sundance, right? And it's also now in a series on Netflix. And then Stephanie is also she's also part of the Motion Picture Arts and Science, the Producers Guild of America, and sits on the board of Women in Film. Thank you for being here. And then Mel Jones is also at Homegrown Pictures, and she's the director of development over there. Oh, she's a president of development over there. Let me get that right. And she also has a film, and you both have a film here at Lamert Park, which you directed. It's an episodic. Has it premiered yet? Tuesday. It premiered on Tuesday. And then we have Amy Adrian, and Amy Adrian is also here with her project.
Half the Picture.
Yeah, Half the Picture. It's your feature documentary. It's a very interesting documentary, which I really do want to talk about more. But I have to mention that Amy is the first recipient of the Stella Artois funded Film Finishing Fund grant. It's in partnership with Women in Films, and it's basically a fund that helps support female filmmakers. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
And then finally we have Liz Destro, and Liz is also here with a very interesting project, Lizzie, which is about the Lizzie Borden, the very infamous Lizzie Borden and that whole case. Thank you for being here. And she's also produced films. I have to mention, she also produced films like Life After Beth, Life of Crime, and Cake that starred Jennifer Aniston. So thank you for being here. And so, Amy, I kind of want to start with you and talk about your documentary, because it's a very interesting take on female filmmakers, and you use statistics and everything to talk about the dismal numbers of female directors, and then you also interview a lot of acclaimed filmmakers right now. So could you tell us a little bit more about the documentary?
Yeah, I directed and produced with my husband, David Harris, as the other producer, Half the Picture, which is a feature doc about women directors in film and TV. And largely the film consists of interviews with fantastic women directors, like Ava DuVernay and Jill Soloway and Lena Dunham and Miranda July and Gina Prince Bythewood, and women whose work in films I'm huge fan of. largely them kind of talking about their experiences and their journey and how they made it, and challenges along the way, and kind of what keeps them inspired and keeps them going. Yeah, and the numbers are really discouraging. We all know, Stacy Smith at USC and Dr. Martha Lawson at San Diego State University does all this research and all these studies about women behind the camera and representation of, people on screen. And the numbers for working women directors are horrible. Over the past 10 years, women direct about 4% of top feature films. So that means, men direct 96% of the feature films that we see. The numbers are even worse for women of color. Women of color in our country are 19.8% of U.S. population are minority women, and minority women direct 0.006% of feature films, top feature films. So that's, that number is indicative of like erasure in our culture, and that's a real problem, as we all know. And so, in the film, we kind of use some statistics just to kind of like give you the context of and the landscape of where we are now.
And can you share some of those statistics?
Yeah, well, just kind of as I was saying, women direct 4% of feature films, around 14 to 16% of television shows, and we're 50% of the population. So it's very skewed. We use some of those statistics just to kind of give you a sense of the problem that's there, but the film is largely about the accomplishments and the artistry of women who are defying that system and are making work in that system, and not just persevering, but excelling and making work that is remarkable.
Yeah, and then speaking of statistics, a lot of, especially what's going on lately, the conversation about hiring more women in more powerful positions, and statistics show that women in power hire more women in other positions, but then there's also people that say, critics that say that it's not necessarily women in power that's going to help the situation because power corrupts. What do you guys say to critics that say that?
Are they men?
I bet they are.
No. We know that when women are gatekeepers, whether they're department heads or directors or producers, they're keeping that door open for other women. So for the real movement to actualize and get to that 50-50 number, the gatekeepers, and by that I mean studio executives, the network executives, the reporters who write about our stories, the agencies, all of these avenues, all of these gates that sort of decide who gets in, those all need to be parity adjacent. So they need to have that same amount of women. It can't just be the filmmakers out here slogging away trying to make our movies, and then when we bring it to Sundance, a male reviewer reviews it and doesn't get it. Or we bring it to a studio and the studio executive just doesn't get it. So that's what's really going to make this a real revolution.
And staying along the topic, how important is mentoring younger filmmakers? And I know you, Mel, started as Stephanie's mentor before and she hired you on, and now you kind of risen in the ranks. How important is having that mentor? Because a lot of times people say that, especially in Hollywood, it's a very hard business to get into, and without a mentor, it's even harder. So what would you say that how important?
I'd say it's 100% necessary. I don't really know anyone who hasn't had a mentor. Like, Stephanie, you had a mentor. Amy Pascal. You see?
Really?
See what I'm saying? Like, it works like that. I went to AFI, one of the best universities, but the first movie that I ever made was because of a mentorship with Stephanie Elaine. I was able to bring her a project, and then we were able to work on it. It was Dear White People. So for all of the information that I gathered and everything that I learned at AFI, it was someone opening the door for me and empowering me and saying, hey, go do this, you can do it. And that's not, that's something that if you don't have it, you're not gonna have an opportunity.
And mentorship is important. Obviously, I was mentored, a lot of the women I know, but even mentorship isn't enough.
No.
So what we're doing at Reframe is an organization that actually funded Stacy Smith's work, and it's a collaboration between Women in Film and Sundance. And part part of the reframe objective is to really change the whole culture. So instead of just one-on-one mentorships, we're trying to create a network of, I like to call it the old girls club, where, we're gonna identify incredible artists who are mid-career and then hook them up with mentors across, and we're gonna call them, it's protege mentor, right? Protege mentor, right? So sponsors. We don't want to say mentor, we want to say sponsor, because we're going to identify these 6 directors the first year. We're going to put them with sponsors across agencies, across studios. So if a woman is up for a job, we need to have women in powerful positions call whoever's hiring and say, this woman's awesome. You need to hire her, because that's how the dudes do it, and we're going to do it too. Yeah.
And Liz, I kind of want to ask you, because this is your 9th time at Sundance. Is it your 9th time here? And you're pretty much a public. How was it for you coming up in the business? Did you have somebody? Was there like an unsung hero that kind of nurtured you, or?
There's just so many great women and some men who were always helpful in making films, and going back to the mentorship, always bringing people under your ring, always learning from everybody else. And I think Sundance has been very supportive of all my films, and I think more and more now, even like I was saying earlier today, now when I go into the buyers meetings, there's women there, which is usually for the last from all my first films here, I would be the only girl in all of the buyers meetings, and it's always intimidating. And a lot of times, even 2 years ago, I distinctly remember being in the room and somebody asked me for a cup of coffee, and I was like, I'm the producer of this movie, it's and you're like, how is this so overlooked, and but I do think it's getting better, but it's still got a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on this, and I want to kind of switch gears to the whole topic of wage parity. You talked about reframe. And can you kind of tell us what they're doing, what the organization is doing to kind of help bridge that gap?
Sure. So Reframe started about 3 or 4 years ago with a group of 50 men and women across Hollywood. And basically we worked for 3 days to sort of crack open what was wrong and how to fix it. And then spent the last 3 years and a lot of money, to be honest, really engaging other companies nationwide and across the world to find out how do we get there, how do we get to 50-50. And we came up with this triangle sort of paradigm, which basically addresses the pipeline, and that's what I was talking about with the sponsorship. The other side of the triangle is about, so one side is the pipeline, one side is the culture, hiring practices, unconscious bias, being aware of all these things. And the bottom line, which is the most important, is the marketplace. How to effectively prove that movies made by and about and for women make money. And so if all 3 of those things are working together, we believe that we can move this thing forward.
And do you think that, recently it was in the news that Michelle Williams, I don't know if you guys heard about that, she was paid very, a lot less than her, how do you guys think that being transparent about information about that is gonna help? Or do you think it's gonna help the cause at all? How most, a lot of these people are revealing these, these gross kind of,
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't feel like I know enough of the agency and the studio system to say that, to say specifically, but I feel like, what you were asking earlier, I think once you have more female agents and people of power, you're gonna have them fighting for women as much as men. I mean, it's great that Mark Wahlberg donated his $1.5 million to the Time's Up campaign, and as well he should, but I hope he also told his agent, why don't you fight for your female clients the same way you fight for me? He can tell his agent that, and that seems like that'll have more of an impact than even just a one-time donation. But I think when you have women, producers, executives, people who can greenlight, people who represent big talent, when there's more diversity of all, race, women, men, and I think it will get better. I think that's a key part of it.
Yeah. And then it's interesting to kind of point out the things that we're talking, the things that are in the conversation right now. And Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, sort of, how was it? I mean, you've been the producer for a minute. How was it? What were the conversations like back then versus now? Could we be so open? Could women be so open about stuff like that, of like getting paid more, or their roles they wanted to get versus?
Look, I mean, things have changed a lot, I will say. Not enough, but things have changed. The fact that we're having these panels, having these conversations, I think transparency, to your last question, is imperative. I think people need to know what's going on so they can gauge whether they should be fighting harder, I'm talking about the agencies, or whether a woman's gonna take that job knowing that she's been paid 10% of her co-star. So I think that's all important. I started a long time ago, so a lot has changed. The fact that we have so much entertainment now that is so diverse is just incredibly exciting. I can't tell you, for me as a Black woman, to be operating in Hollywood now, where women's stories and people of color stories are not. I mean, in the old days, it was like banging on the door, just banging, and then breaking it down to get something done. And now at least I feel there's a receptivity and a sort of a general conscience that this needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. And Mel, as an up-and-comer, how has it been for you?
It's been pretty awesome because, like Stephanie said, now there are a lot more women executives, Black people who are executives. So like the project that I did, Lamar Park, every single person who greenlit anything along the way was a Black person or a woman of color. And so I don't know that like 20 years ago that would have been the experience, but that's been my experience. So it was really easy for me to talk about what I wanted to do and what my vision was, and to see people nod their heads and go, oh, I understand, instead of, I don't get it,
Oh my God, how cool is that?
Yeah.
For me, like, I'm like, yes, that's a great thing. I think that's something to celebrate. Like, I'm excited, and I think we just need to have more of it.
No, I agree. And I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier about having how studios and networks need to see that there's power behind these female-driven content. And I think 2006, the highest grossing films in 2006, they were both female-led. It was the Star Wars movie and then Beauty and the Beast. And so with these kind of revelations, and then we saw what happened with the Big Little Lies and Handmaid's Tale, it was basically swept up during the awards season. With these kind of revelations, and this is for all of you guys, how optimistic are you about the future of female-driven storytelling? You can start.
I mean, even with Lizzie, Lizzie is about the Lizzie Borden murders, but it's really about the oppression of women in the 1890s, and it's very parallel what's happening right now. So it's really great. This year, so many female-driven stories, and I think even like 5 years ago, a movie that like Lizzie would have never gotten made, even with the 2 stars that I had. So it's really come a long way, and there's a lot of great female financiers now that are amazing. That I had some, and again, like 5 years ago, I didn't know any female financiers. So to pitch a female-driven story to them, they'd be like, I don't know, like. Where's the guys? Like whatever. This whole experience has been really eye-opening and really awesome. I think this year especially. So.
Yeah, and I think there is so much that's discouraging, and the numbers are still pretty discouraging, that you can kind of get in the back of your head that like nothing's changed, nothing's changing, and nothing's ever going to change just because there is a lot of bad news, but. I mean, it's clearly not the case. I mean, you just look at, and as you guys were saying, the diversity of shows that are on TV that are written about, that are like the cultural touchstones, and movies, I think, are a little bit behind kind of where TV's at. But yeah, women's stories and people of color, and stories where those people are the center. Like, there's just such diversity of storytelling, even in the past few years. So I think you have to be optimistic. And yeah, there is a really long way to go. But those films are connecting and finding their audiences, and people are receptive, and that's great, and it's only going to continue to flourish. And that's the argument that's always been a little bit frustrating, like, Hollywood's about making money, and it's a business and all that, but these kinds of films and shows make money. It's almost like illogical that there's been money left on the table for so long.
Yeah. And I also think that the reason why we're able to see that there are audiences is because of the digital landscape. So with, Limerick Park having done it as an episodic and having been able to, whether anyone, wants to pick it up or not, to put it on the internet and have people discover it, I think it helps to prove that point. And I think with the internet and the technologies that we have, with Sean Baker making movies on his cell phones, it empowers women to do a lot more without having to wait for permission. And then we can prove to everyone with the metrics and with the numbers that we have an audience that we connect to. So I think that that's also been really, really helpful.
Look, I'm encouraged, but I would just say it again, the revolution is not live until all of the gatekeepers look like everybody in America.
And Amy, you touched on this earlier, and I wanted to talk about the opportunities and the roles that women have. You said that television offers more of an interesting platform. A platform for more interesting roles for females. So maybe for Stephanie and for Liz, how do you think film can kind of get up to speed with that?
I mean, all we can do is hire women and encourage other people to hire women. So on all my films, I try to hire as many women as possible. I try to always have female assistants or female people who can learn from me and then, move on and do the same that I'm doing. So I don't know how much power I actually have except to do that. And then, I don't know.
That is power. I mean, I've been doing this a while. I used to say, I want to hire the best people for the job. Then I realized by saying that, I was looking at metrics that were like, who has the best resume, who's won the most awards, who's done the most work, and typically those were all men, and most of them were white men. So I stopped saying that, and I started to say, I want my sets to be diverse with all kinds of people, and I want to find the best of all kinds of people on the set. And we made a movie last year that was at Sundance called Burning Sands, Mel and I produced. Every single department head was first time. We had a first time director, a first time DP, a first time production designer, a first time, but everybody was first time. It was crazy. And guess what? Every single one of those folks are now working other movies. They got agents, they got the work in the studio.
They don't even answer my phone calls.
I mean, everybody has a first time. And, just like they'll jump and give, the young, smart guy, Colin Trevorrow, a $100 million movie after doing $500,000 one, everybody has a first time. And I think if people in positions, Lizzie, you are powerful because you're doing something. How many women do you think are getting their start and moving up on your sets? That's amazing. So I think we all take that power that all of us can do something every day to push this forward.
And can you talk about the power and the importance of having women telling other women's stories or having people of color telling stories on people of color? Can you maybe now?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think it's something that I actually learned from Stephanie, so it's like me saying what Stephanie would say. But I think it's really important. The authenticity is really important because in its specificity, I was watching a movie and my ex-husband is Senegalese, and so I've had a chance to kind of see that world. And I was watching a movie that was made by a white woman about some Senegalese women. And it was fine, it was a great movie, but they didn't eat. They didn't sit down on the floor and eat, and the mom was nowhere to be found, and there was all these little intricacies that kind of made them less human than what they could have been. And I think that in the specificity of authenticity, we are able to connect on a greater level. And I think that's why it's important that if you're gonna tell a story about a black woman, there better be a black woman somewhere in the room. Because it's not cool not to do that. And for anyone else, LGBTQ, Latino, whatever, I'm not gonna be a black woman doing that. We had an example of that. We made a movie called Juanita, and it's coming out on Netflix really soon. It's Alfre Woodard's first role as a leading lady in her entire life. Come on now, how is that possible? But it is, and we're glad that we did it. And a big part of the storyline is that she falls in love with this younger Native American male. And Adam Beach, who's played by Adam Beach, who's so hot. And so, you know, we get there, we shoot in Virginia. I'm from Virginia. I like to take the productions home. So we went to Virginia. I convinced Stephanie to come to Virginia again. And we're like, oh, there's a powwow. Remember, it was like some powwow. We're just gonna shoot the powwow. Like, they were Blackfoot Indians. We're like, this is a powwow, we'll just put it there. And I remember Stephanie and I were like sitting together. We're like, wait a minute, this is wrong. Like, we have to actually call a Blackfoot Indian. And so we did it. And we found some from Montana. They came, we flew them out, and then they were so happy to be included that, like, they brought their teepees and they sewed the costumes to make them authentic, and they smudged everybody and they prayed over everybody. And it made, like, when you watch it on film, it's real. You know, and just to honor people's existence, you know, is just so important. So I think you guys will connect to that scene in a much stronger way than you would have if we would have popped into some random, you know, powwow down the street, you know. So it's really important.
And you know, it's tricky because you don't want to say that somebody can't do anything, you know, because we all have a point of view about something. I can produce or direct a movie about a man just as well as a man. So I want to say that, but we do want to say that somebody behind the camera has to have a connection, authentic connection to the material, so that the specificity that Mel's talking about is there. That's what's going to make people go, oh my God, this movie's so great. I've never seen anything like this before, because they haven't. And that's what's really important about making sure, because I know when I go to the movies and I see a movie, it's a black movie, and I look at it, I just know there was nobody behind the camera. I can tell.
Oh, here we go.
I'm furious. And they've appropriated like our leaders and our artists and things like that, and I'm thinking, wow. And so now we get calls all the time, movies ready to go into production, and they go, oops. Do you think you guys can come help us produce this movie? And it's an odd thing, because on one hand, we want to make sure that those movies have that authenticity, but on the other hand, we don't want to be the front people. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, they had some black folks there, so we're good. You know, I like that.
Oh, and then speaking of this, like, kind of industry practices and kind of breaking what's been happening, we've seen this wave of the underrepresented and people that have maybe been ignored in the past kind of standing up for themselves. Like with the 2 years ago, the Oscars So White definitely brought the conversation of diversity to the forefront. Lately, we've had the Time's Up and the Me Too that's bringing the conversation of the reframe. It's bringing the conversation of female mistreatment. In each one of your opinion, how can we utilize this time to not only optimize conversations about those things, but other kind of problems that we're seeing in Hollywood, not just with women, but with the LGBT community, with the disabled community that's also been very underrepresented. How can we optimize this moment right now?
Look, I think we're doing it. I think panels like this are fantastic. I think that all the women who were brave enough to come and speak on their behalf and on the behalf of other women, and having that have impact. Because women have been saying for a long time what's been going on, and nobody's been listening or paying attention or doing anything about it. So I'm very encouraged, because this is a moment, and it can be a movement if we all continue to applaud the people who are working and continue to resist and to speak out and to march and to just be conscious of what's happening and just not let it go back the way it was. So I think everybody's an activist now. That's how I feel.
I like, as artists, we can all make movies about these things and really showcase what's going on, and like the authenticity of female characters in all of these movies, and the gay and lesbian community and women of color, just making authentic material with all of those groups is, to focus on that is the best way, I think, for us.
I agree, because I think that, like you said, like if you don't see yourself in your culture, then you don't exist. And I think by giving other people a face and giving them like the art and to be able to see yourself, then you can aspire for more. So I think being able to hire more people to tell their stories, and also being compassionate about other people's stories that aren't like your own, but you know the struggle. So like you said, disabled folks, like obviously, like if the character is disabled, I would want to hire someone who was disabled. So just being open and aware, like we did with the Native American story, knowing that our struggles are the same, so that we should be together in the fight.
Yeah, no, I think you guys all said it really well. I mean, and I think there is, a greater awareness of intersectionality and how all of our experiences are interconnected and all need to be represented. And I too am really encouraged that it just seems like people from all different walks of life are taking stands and being courageous, and we're all building off that courage that we see each other exhibiting. I mean, something like Natalie Portman at the Golden Globes, that's her stepping up in a way. I don't think 1 year ago you would have seen an A-list actress call out what she called out in that room of power. And I see that and I go, damn, that like raises the bar for me. Like, I need to be braver in what I do. And I think women all over in entertainment and in other fields are like speaking up. They're sick and tired, and they're standing up for themselves, and we're all kind of getting mobilized by seeing the courage of everyone else.
Yeah, definitely. And so we're going to open it up to Q&A from the audience. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. But before we do that, what are some things that maybe we could do short term as a room of people in the industry and filmmakers that maybe could help reconcile the issue that women are facing in the industry, like something that maybe wouldn't take a long time to implement?
I mean, I think what a lot of you have already said. I mean, hiring. I mean, these panels are great and awareness is great, but fund women stories, people of color stories, different, the stories of different kinds of people other than people who look exactly like you. So funding and hiring.
Okay. So we are going to open it up for questions. And I think there's a mic if you have something interesting.
He's right here.
Thank you so much for such an enormous amount of wisdom up there. Hi, Amy.
That's Maria Geis, who was one of the leaders of the movement of women directors. She went to the ACLU, she went to the EEOC. She started like raising good trouble, fighting the good fight, and she's been fighting the fight for years. She's in my movie. I admire her so much.
Well, I can't tell you how excited I am after 6 years of working on this, and it all really does seem to be evolving. I just wanted to bring up one issue, which is just as a matter of kind of challenging, and that is that, with the Harvey Weinstein thing and all of that going on, I mean, what we discover is that that this industry functions on a system of reciprocity. It's quid pro quo. You do this for me, and I'll do this for you. And this has put women in a terrible position, when advising position to compromise their sexuality and their dignity and so forth and so on. One of the other systems that Hollywood uses that functions on reciprocity traditionally is mentoring. And that's what we see happen. I mean, one of the reasons that people of color have been so left out is that white men have been running Hollywood forever and mentoring guys who look just like them. What's his name from Jurassic Park, who got, they said because he looked like them. That's why we have all these guys who, with baseball hats and beards and glasses, and they look like a bunch of clones. So by the same token, as we go ahead and pursue this most effective system of advancing women and people of color in this industry, how are we going to not make the same mistakes that white male Hollywood has made through their concepts of mentorships, when mentorships also, work on a system of reciprocity. You do this for me, and I'll do this for you, and that really prevent young women filmmakers or mid-career women filmmakers from advancing based on meritocracy, the meritocracy of their work. And so I just want to bring it up because obviously mentoring is so important, as you said, crucially important, and yet in another way it really can function to keep people out, to to stand in the way of the democratization of our storytelling, and to keep the power in, concentrated, among the people who are in power already. So I just want to put that out there. Do we have ideas about how we can make systems of mentorships function to really not make the same mistakes that white male Hollywood has made for decades?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna try to take that. I think it's one of the programs that I think was helpful, and I think it's got to be on an organizational level, is like a Film Independence Project Involved program. And I don't know if you've heard of that program, but I was a part of that program, and so in order to be a part of it, you have to be a member of an underrepresented group, whether you're a woman or a person of color or a member of the LGBTQ community. I had to get all the letters in. But I think it has to happen on like an institutional level where these programs kind of interface with the studio system. And I think that's how I found success. Like, I didn't just walk up to Stephanie's door and knock on and be like, hey, mentor me. There was a process where I was kind of vetted based on my merit. And then they were able to identify both men and women who were interested in helping out and being a part of that movement. So I do think that it's definitely on an institutionalized level that it would have to happen, but programs like Project Involve, I think, is where we start. And so those of you who are in this room who have money to fund it, it only happens in Los Angeles. It should happen all across the country, and I think that's where, we could start right there with that program specifically.
And there are other programs. I mean, Women in Film has a mentor program. The Producers Guild has a program. The Academy has a program. So there are a lot of venues and organizations that are on that tip. But I mean, I'm not sure. I think that did I ask you for anything back? No, not really, no. Right. So I'm not sure that everybody who is in a power position as a mentor expects a quid pro quo, but so I'm not sure. I'm an optimist. I'm a producer.
And besides those programs, what other advice would you give for young filmmakers that are looking for mentorship right now?
Even if you I think you have to create stuff. You have to work on your craft. You have to get your scripts and your shorts, to a certain place. I had another idea, but I just forgot.
People send me shorts and little pieces all the time that I think they're talented. Then I'll be like, come to my set, or come hang out and keep creating.
That's not
But I think a lot of young filmmakers now, I don't know why, there's maybe it's weird because they have so much more access to create, and I see a lot less of it. I don't know why. When I was younger in film school, and every weekend we created so much stuff. We were so excited to have access to cameras and equipment, but I don't find that as much. When young filmmakers come to me and they go like, I don't have any, shorts or anything to show. I'm like, it's so easy. You have a cell phone. Like, you have actors. You have just figure it out. And people who are go-getters, I'm always trying to bring them back in and keep them on my team.
And I would totally agree. I think largely it's make stuff, and some of the women in our film, I think Jill Soloway had this kind of awesome tirade about how networking is really just day drinking, and that's not going to get mentorship is important. And I don't think I've ever had a mentor. If I would love one, but that hasn't really been part of my road. And not to say that I would like that, but I think part of it is just don't get too caught up in the networking and the mentoring and getting numbers and getting whatever. It's you just focus on your work and do what you love and find joy in the work, making work that you're passionate about, and then hopefully that will gather people around you that you can keep getting your stuff out there. So it is important to meet people and make connections, but that shouldn't be the focus.
There's such a superficiality about Hollywood and making stuff. So everybody who all these people on the panel, we're all passionate about really making stuff. So we're not out partying all night and doing all those things. You're not going to meet people doing that. You're going to meet people creating and having similar like-minded artistic similarities.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah. Okay. this is maybe more towards Stephanie a little bit. It seems to me, maybe on a particular scale, that so much of the content created is much more focused on driving a brand, not just connecting, driving a brand, not just connecting with an audience, this and that. But if you're not the Netflix brand, the Hulu brand, the Amazon brand, the Disney brand, then that content, may or may not get made. And so much of the brand gatekeepers are up there in the marketing departments, are not down in the working trenches with the working women and the working people of color. It's a separate strata of people determining the content based on a whole separate bunch of metrics. So it's basically the marketing executive ranks, let's say. Is there a way that you see, and I know this is a filmmaker event, but is there a way that you see some of this that we're working on can drift upward as opposed to trying to make it trickle downward? If there's a way that it can drift upward so that those brands are more open to being diverse brand or aware of the diversity that could be valuable. That makes sense.
Well, I think it's no surprise that so many of our filmmakers were publicists and marketers like Ava and Justin and Stella McGee, because they recognize the importance of not only just making the material, but actually getting it out there. We've been working at Netflix a lot in the last couple of years. There are people of color at networks in the executive ranks, which is very, very helpful because they get our stuff. So I don't know the answer, but I do know, again, the marketing ranks need to be diverse. I mean, if there's somebody there who has an experience that gets it, they're gonna come up with all these ideas to get to those people. So you just can't have a homogenous group of marketing execs marketing a diverse group of product, It's just, that's why I just keep saying it's systemic. It's not just about making the material, it's about the whole system being reflective of America so that we can not only just go out there and make it and then just hold the hope that somebody's gonna brand it and put it out there. I mean, that's why we're so excited about Lemert, because we don't have to wait for a brand. We can just put it out ourselves and find our own audience and hopefully build up a lot of excitement so that one of the big brands will, get it and understand. I mean, that's what we did with Dear White People. There was a whole campaign started way before we even made the movie, which built up this audience, and that gave us juice by the time we got to Sundance.
But do those companies have the equivalent of a project involved embedded in their HR, in their employment structure? Is there that? If I walked into some large brand company, would they have an executive version of project involved or something, or they don't?
There's a lot of diversity executives at a lot of companies, and they are trying to connect talent with their companies. So there is that in the corporate world.
But I do think that that's kind of ghettoized in a way because they're like the diversity person. So like, what are they doing exactly? So I mean, I do think that like you said, they have to be a part of that marketing team because they are great at marketing and they happen to be a woman or they happen to be a person of color. Because I do think that some of those diversity positions tend to just be, to satisfy the need to have them there, and I don't know how much they're able to accomplish, without actually being a part of those teams.
We had a question over here.
I work for a digital publisher, and I've seen a lot of the editorial calendar for what we're going to do during the award season, and a lot of it still focuses on the harassment allegations and things that we've, fortunately have come to light in the past year. What are stories that aren't being told that we should be responsible for telling? What can we do for female filmmakers that we're not already doing as the media?
I mean, I think just shouting out their work, amplifying their work, calling out the great films made by women directors and asking them about the content and what inspired them and what they want to do next. And I mean, I think, saying their name and amplifying and all of that just helps. And, there's, I don't know,
I love all the like Oscar red carpet stuff, so I'm kind of like frivolous in that way. But I like that there was a campaign that was like, you know, don't ask her what she's wearing, ask her about the film she was in and the character and how, you know, I think focusing on the substance and the work of what people are doing, that's really important. And I think it's, you know, I think it's obviously essential that, you know, all those stories have come to light to really give people a sense of the environment women have been working in for decades. Like, this stuff has been happening. So we need to be talking about it, but that's not the whole of women's experience in the industry. We're all here because we're passionate and we're making things and we're trying to tell our stories. So as much as the focus can be on that, I think is great.
I think. You had okay.
Yeah, just pass me the mic. Being out there in the public eye as a woman can be extremely rough, especially in the digital age. What advice would you ladies have to young women who are looking to either join the film industry in any capacity to dealing with daily harassment and just being overly criticized compared to our male compatriots?
Somebody behind me said just say no. So.
I mean, I think you have to have a strong sense of why you're in Hollywood and really, like you were saying, stick to the core, the substance of why you're here and what you want to do, and not get so caught up in the socializing, and which is really important. It's good to be out there and it's good to make connections, but I think if you comport yourself in a manner that it's like you're all about business and you know, for so many years, I think that the entire society, women included, were sort of complicit in the power dynamics that were happening. Like, we're now at a place where we know that we don't have to be anymore. And so, and I think also the men are on notice too. So I think it's a really good time to be a woman in Hollywood, frankly, and just be all about whatever it is you're trying to do.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, okay. We have one here as well, and then one here. Yeah.
Hi, I love what you were all saying. I think what's so important about Reframe, it isn't just about young women. It's about mid-career women in all aspects, because we, you know, it's been going on for centuries, but women even coming up, and even in the 90s or the 2000s, we didn't all bond together, and now is our chance. And I think, you know, like when we're making deals on projects, it's like I'm reaching out much more and much more transparent about, like, help me. What do I do on this deal? Or how do I protect my female writer or my female director? Or how do I protect myself? Or what do I do? Because I didn't have a mentor. I wish I had a mentor too. And so I just think that Reframe can do a great thing for mid-career, because we all have a lot to say, and we're all living longer, and there's a lot of material that older people want to enjoy. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that's just it's another important aspect of diversity too. I mean, all these studies that USC and San Diego State University do, they also look at the age of people on screen, and, you know, older people are very underrepresented, and when they are represented, often it's not very three-dimensional, and that's a big part of it too. And also, when you look at women directors, like, women directors tend to work from like 30 to 50. And like male directors work from 20 to 80. You know, you have these very older gentlemen that are still making films, which is good, and they should be, but like women directors too, just because you're 50 or 60, like, end up, you know, we need to like all kind of open our minds to just these biases we all have about age, or, you know, all of the other, you know, factors of diversity.
We have time for one more question. I think it was lady back here.
I'm part of a team that includes Killer Films, Killer Content, Abigail Disney, and we've announced this initiative, Level Forward, which is about leveling the playing field and then creating a positive go-forward system. We've announced a starting point $2 million development fund for marginalized creative communities, including women, people of color, and everyone else. And it was born from the atrocities of you-know-what, which I can't talk publicly about because still send notice, lawyers in the room. But I have a question, which is, in making this announcement, we've received a lot of resumes, we've received a lot of pitches, we're staffing a studio, we're staffing creative teams, and they all look like me. And I want to reach into a nexus of trust between women of color, white women, LGBT, and the other marginalized communities in trusting one another to come together and support and provide that support, which is quite often so elusive. And I was talking with another woman in the room this morning about that and trying to figure out how we can create that nexus. And in the same way that we should be working on your sets, you should be working on our sets, we should all be hiring one another. But I need your help in understanding how to create that trust and that nexus.
I got some women for you.
Yeah, call us.
Send them over.
You know, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I think that's a really
such an intelligent and deeply felt question. And, you know, intersectionality is something that not a lot of people even understand. But what it is making sure that as we move forward with gender parity, that we're not just pushing forward white women and making women of color sort of another second class or fourth class at that point, if you have white men, black, you know, men of color, white women, women of color. So just the understanding that you know that that's important is huge. And I'm so grateful. And we have a lot of smart, talented women of color who I'm sure would love to jump in there.
Let's talk.
I love it. Way to end on this talk. I want to thank you guys, not just for being here, but for the work that you're doing, for being at the forefront of this push to make this a better environment for us. And also thank you guys for being here too. This was very informative and encouraging at the same time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.